It's nice to be on a stage that has enough microphones. I've been on panels with like 7 people this weekend where we have 2 mics to just pass back and forth, so this is good. Good morning, everybody. It's really crowded in this place. Thanks for finding your way down to the basement. It's crazy up there. I didn't think I'd make it. While my director of publicity, Jeremy Atkins, while he tries to get the tech working, which looks like it's actually going to work for once, when he gets this going, I'll just introduce everybody else. I'm Scott Allie. I'm the editor-in-chief of Dark Horse. That's brand new for me, so I'm still pretty excited about saying it. And I also edit the Buffy comics. What's happening? Are you leaving?
Oh, shouldn't
Thank you. After all that drama about mics. To my left is Jane Espenson. Writer of Buffy and many things and the creator of Husbands.
Which you can see at lovehusbands.com.
And then down the end is Rebekah Isaacs, the artist on Season 9.
Hey guys, thanks so much for coming out.
So I actually want to start off today with a really quick story for everyone in the room. Everybody likes stories, right? So one of the things that was really awesome when we started doing Buffy Season 8, aside from the fact that Buffy was finally back, is the fact that we had so many comic book retailers who kept telling us over and over again that they were really excited because they started seeing more women coming into their stores than ever before, which, you know, given the fact that, you know, the comics industry at times has been sort of a boys' club, was always really nice to hear. Well, looking out in this audience today, like, I mean, obviously you can see why that's true, and obviously anyone who's a fan of Joss knows that he knows how to write strong female characters, like almost like no one else. But the thing that's really amazing is, like, you see it, you know, I see it in panels, and I see it, like, you know, kind of everywhere I look whenever we're doing anything Buffy-related. But what's really awesome is coming to New York Comic Con, and for the first time in my life, I'm walking straight into the men's bathroom, and there's a giant line for the women's bathroom. Which, like, who ever thought there would be a line for a women's bathroom at a comic show? Because when I went to my first one in the basement of a Marriott out by the airport in Indianapolis in 1983, literally, I don't think I saw anyone other than my mom. She had free reign of the bathroom all day. So, without further ado, I'm going to get things started here. And hey, look at that. Scott.
I don't actually remember which number this is. I think this is Angel and Faith number 16. Does that look like 16?
Yeah.
17? Sorry. Okay, so this is this is by Steve Morris, who's been running around the show. Steve doesn't like crowds, so we may never see him again at this convention. But Steve was here this weekend. This is a cover by Steve Morris, who has been doing all the covers for Angel and Faith and some of the covers for Buffy, and also the line art covers for Spike. This issue has a young Giles, that's him on your left, and Ethan Rain and some other unknown character. All right, everybody, a huge round of applause, a devastating round of applause for Sierra Hahn, the other editor on all the Whedon stuff. So in this issue, in this arc, you see this flashback to young Giles and Ethan conjuring a demon. Can anybody guess which demon a young Giles and Ethan Rain would have been conjuring? Yeah, all right. And that's that symbol on the bicep there, right? Okay, figured everybody knew. We were really trying to keep a lot of secrets for a while, and then it was like, yeah, no, all this stuff, it's like, it's easier to just say who's going to be coming up next. So I know some things have spilled out, usually from me speaking carelessly to Buffy Fest, about some of the upcoming characters, but Igon will be a significant character through the 16 through 19 arc.
I'm really glad we're showing this, because I was going to have to tell you today that I've labbed that
Oh, yeah.
in the interviews yesterday.
Well, and actually one of the coolest things, one of all of our favorite things about season 9 is when we get Rebekah to design a new monster. Because Rebekah's been designing the coolest demons and monsters in the first few scripts, and Chris has said this a number of times, in the first few scripts, Chris would describe at great length what he wanted to see in a demon, and then he just stopped completely. His descriptions are, it's a demon, and then Rebekah just does whatever she wants. With Igon, it was a little trickier because we had stuff to fit into, but we had a lot of room to do something brand new, and I love what she came up with. Another Steve Morris cover. I can't remember what number anything is. Do you remember what number that is? Yeah. We're very far ahead of things, and it makes us forget what issue we're looking at.
I'm going to pull up my email from you when you told me what images to put on this panel, and then we'll have a little cheat sheet.
Another demon, another creature that we're dealing with here, which we're not going to say too much about, but this one actually I think Steve created, right? I don't think you designed that.
I haven't seen this one yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
We share a lot of information about it.
New and shiny.
No spoilers on this panel whatsoever, so that's good, right?
Right on, and that's the third volume, right? That's the cover for the third volume, which is a story that I think everybody's probably already read by now, right? Angel and Faith 11 through 14. How many of you are reading Angel and Faith? Show of hands. More of you should, frankly. If you're reading the Buffy book, you really got to be reading Angel and Faith, because the book is phenomenal. The stories do not connect very much. There's little ways in which information and characters go from one book to the other, but mostly they're pretty standalone, but you really got to be reading Angel and Faith. It's just Chris and Rebekah are doing phenomenal work. The guest artists have been doing great work. Gotta wait for the spike applause.
Now I'm curious to see how many of you are reading Spike. Yeah. Online research has told me. Yeah, so we launched a Spike series just like last month. I think the second issue's out now. I think the second issue's for sale at the Dark Horse booth. A Spike series in which after he had a very kind of tear-stained conversation with Buffy in issue 10, he split. He went to the moon with his bug ship. So if you're not reading the books, you've missed a lot.
Yeah, I wrote a little bug ship one-off that was awfully fun. So.
The bugs have been a lot of fun, and at first it was like, Joss gave us these weird bugs to deal with. What the hell are we going to do with them? But they're a riot, and all the writers.
Oh, lots and lots of Beatles jokes.
Yeah, and George just loves the references. But yeah, so this great writer named Victor Gischler has stepped in to write the Spike series, and every so often we have the experience of, we get to work with a lot of the writers from the TV show, and most of season 8 was writers from the show. With season, the one guy who stepped in first for season 9 was Chris Gage, and the way that he synced up with the group. What? Oh, okay.
She's talking to mom.
The way that Chris synced with the group when we did that writers' summit was great, and working with him has been great. Victor is stepping into the game fairly late. He didn't have the benefit of the writers' summit, but the way that he's nailed the voices and the characters in the Spike series is really exciting for us, and we're hoping to make him a big part of season 10 when that rolls around.
So this is one of our Willow covers by David Mack, and we're launching the Willow miniseries in November. It's written by Jeff Parker with art by Brian G. Willow sort of leaves the Buffy series for a little while to try and rediscover magic, and her goal is to bring magic back to our reality or to Buffy's world. So she goes on her own side adventure where there's a lot of trials and tribulations that she'll go through, but there's going to be a lot of growth for Willow in that, and we'll discover some things about magic and how it's going to affect the remainder of season 9 and probably spill over into season 10.
Who's familiar with an artist named Megan Lara? Megan did some Serenity fan art that got a really positive reaction from you guys, as well as from Joss. And I don't actually remember how we came to work with her. Can you?
Oh, just one of my coworkers had discovered her Serenity prints, and I had held on to this email with her information for maybe 2 years. It just sat in my inbox because I didn't want to forget her. I wanted to be able to locate her. So when the Willow thing came up, I was like, this is the girl we got to go to. We got to see if we can make this work. So that's how we found Megan.
Someone would just speak for themselves. So everybody knew, Joss had expressed early on that Illyria would be a significant part of season 9. Illyria shows up very soon. Won't say exactly when, but she'll be showing up pretty soon. Phil Noto and Georges have both been having fun getting her onto the covers. I think at the Writers' Summit what happened was Chris said, can I do Illyria? And Joss said, no, I want Illyria. All right, is that how this is working? And then that's how that worked. And this is one of George's covers showing there's a pretty bad fight between Buffy, that's her upside down on top, and Illyria, and Ko, one of the demon characters that we've introduced in season 9, and Severin, who is one of the big bads of season 9. And he's been sort of keeping a low profile lately, but as we gear up for the climax, he's taking a bigger and bigger part in things. And everybody loves Joe Chen, right? Are you familiar with Joe Chen's artwork from season 8? We've managed to keep Joe on board for trade paperback covers, so she did the Spike trade that you saw a minute ago and all of the Buffy trade paperback covers for season 9, and we're happy to have her around. She's been focused on some manga work that she's doing. She lives in the States, but she's doing the work for a Japanese publisher. But we're able to get her onto these covers, which is really gratifying. And that last image, everybody loves seeing Kennedy on a cover, right? Everybody loves Kennedy, right? This is another artist that Sierra brought in. Although this project, yeah, what's that? But also this particular book was one of Sierra's ideas. And for those of you who aren't reading all the Buffy comics or any of the Buffy comics, if you've been reading Buffy but not the other ones, this is just definitively the great starting point to get familiar with what we're doing. Can you tell them a little bit about what that is?
So this will just be coming out in January, and it's going to have issue 1 from Buffy season 9, Angel and Faith, Spike and Willow. So it's kind of just a sampler for what's to come, seeing your favorite characters across the board. So if you're reading Buffy but you haven't tried out the other ones, it's an opportunity to check those out and see if you like them.
At the low price of $4.99.
Yeah, most of our Buffy comics are $3 for a 22-page comic. This has 4 complete first issues for $5, so this is really bargain pricing, at its best. So we wanted to show you guys some really cool upcoming art and everything, obviously. But this panel is about all things Buffy, and we want to talk about. First of all, I want to start actually with Jane. You've just come back to the book. So obviously, did you guys all read the news about this new character that Jane's introducing?
Billy.
It just came out this Wednesday.
Yeah, I was signing copies yesterday, and then like halfway through the signing, I stopped seeing the Billy comics coming through, and it was when I knew you guys had sold out.
Yep.
So, woo.
What's funny, and I guess this does say something about comics again, unfortunately, is when we announced this, it was actually really exciting because we announced it with Out Magazine, and the response was overwhelmingly positive, and then on the forums, the response was overwhelmingly positive. And then you go to the comics forums, and they're like, it's another gay character.
But first, let's let Jane say a little bit about who Billy is for those of you that didn't read 14 yet.
Yeah, and I can comment on the positive and negatives of it. Yeah, we introduce Billy, who's a 16-year-old kid whose story is very much like that of girls we've seen on our show, where going along, feeling like an outcast, feeling like there's something special in me that nobody's seeing, and then instead of having a moment of calling, has more of a moment of necessity of stepping up and decides to sort of self-identify as a slayer. Like, the mythology doesn't allow for boy slayers, but this is what I want to be. And so that's the story of Billy. And when this was announced, there was a lot of positive reaction, but there was also some people going like, but But the whole point of Buffy is female empowerment, and the whole point is that this is a mythology that's just for us, and a biology-driven calling that's just for us. And I get that, but I also know how many young men have come up to me and said what previously only young women had said to me, which is like, Buffy got me through high school. I identified with Buffy. And the number, and then are you really like, who was rerunning the Buffy reruns? It was all on Logo. And it's like, there is a way in which Buffy was speaking to young gay men that hadn't been addressed, which was that feeling of being an outcast and being bullied and having something in you you wanted to express and having a secret, all that stuff spoke to a population that we weren't addressing with the population of our slayers, and it seemed to me like a thing that should be addressed. And so far as I can tell, as when the issue came out and people actually saw it, all of the negative reaction, as far as I can tell, has sort of evaporated because people have read the issue now and they're going like, oh, I get him, I love him, I get his struggle. There's no usurping going on. It's more of a as every group goes through and gets acceptance, they should put their hand out and help the next group through.
Yeah, and just as far as the mythology goes, Billy wasn't chosen.
Wasn't chosen.
Billy chose, and Billy doesn't have superpowers. Billy is just like rising up to this challenge because he feels a need to.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so we aren't messing with the mythology, so don't sweat that. It's still girl power.
Yeah, Jane, did you think, looking back to, obviously having the direct relationship with the show, that you would eventually still be keeping these characters alive in comics and writing these today?
I guess I must have thought I'd have to turn to fanfic. I knew.
Who would read Jane Espenson's fanfic? I kind of thought so.
I thought when Buffy ended, I remember talking with the other writers about like treasure these last few days because we are going to look back on this the rest of our career and go like this will never be again. And then to have it keep continuing this long, it's fantastic. When I got to write that Spike one-up, it was like, I'm writing for Spike again. Like it's amazing and wonderful.
What do you think it is about these characters in this world that really does stand the test of time? Like why we can still walk into a completely packed room 15 years after the fact?
When high school stops being hell, I think this will stop being relevant maybe, but there's something so universal about that. There's something universal about the underdog stepping up. That's always there.
So, going down the line here, what would you say obviously we all know Jane's, your individual relationships to the show before actually working on the comics, if you want to talk a little bit about when you were a fan, how you became a fan, favorite episodes, favorite seasons, all that stuff that people love to talk about.
Let's start with Rebekah.
Oh, okay. I didn't really discover the show until just recently. I started watching it a bit before I got the job, but I didn't really get into it until after I got it. And as someone who really did have a very bad high school experience, I did enjoy that theme of high school as hell. But the things that always stick with me are the friendships, and I think that's always the core of Buffy stories, is people who value each other for just who they are underneath the veneers of clothing and style and social group. And I love how, especially in the beginning seasons with bringing Cordelia into the group and bringing Willow and Xander and all these people who just couldn't fit in anywhere else, and they all form this really lasting bond. And they're like, it feels like they're our friends too when we watch the show. I think
I was a fan before I wrote for the show. I think one of the first episodes that I saw was The Pack, and I remember thinking oh my God, how true is that? Those kids, they were hyenas, and they just laughed. And then, and I saw Ted, which was the one with the lovely late John Ritter, and I was like, oh, I get where the story's going. This is about how she inappropriately uses strength when she shouldn't, and she's gonna hurt this guy, and she's gonna, oh my God, look at his face, and he's the best. I was like, oh my God, this is the best show ever. And so I desperately wanted to be on the show. I was a writer on Ellen, the sitcom, at that point, and I was like, but I'm a comedy writer, and those things are really two different worlds in Hollywood. You're either a comedy writer or you write for 1 hour. And it's like, okay, I'm going to retool. And so I wrote an NYPD Blue, so I'd have a 1-hour sample script, and sent that in, told my agent I'm switching over, and he was like, no, you can't, you'll have to start everything over. Your title will drop, your pay grade will, you just have to retool. It's like being a soprano and saying, no, I think I'm going to be an alto now. What? No, but your vocal cords. And so submitted the NYPD Blue, and a produced episode of Ellen, and got to go in and meet Joss, and you had to like pitch stories in your job interview, and it was all very tense, and I got the job. And so I went from being a fan to being on the staff, but the wonderful thing is you don't stop being a fan. The way we would wait for the next Joss script to read through, it was just like waiting at the TV set. And I've remained a fan this whole time.
I discovered Buffy right when it started. I was 17, and it was, I was in high school and struggling through all these relationships, falling in love, falling out of love, fighting with my friends, struggling, all those things. And, I think I did fall in love with those characters, like what Rebekah was saying, and their dynamic. And, it just always stuck with me. And I still go back and watch all those shows over and over and over again. And even though I'm not in high school, the stories are still relevant to who I am now. And as I develop and grow as a person, those stories still resonate no matter what age you are. And that really speaks to the writing in that world.
I was working at Dark Horse when we first got the license. Another editor was the initial editor on the stuff, but actually left the company before we started any real work on it. And so when he left, I said, so Buffy's free and it has the word vampire in the title. Can I edit that? I hadn't seen the show yet. Well, a couple of my friends were constantly like, you have to watch Buffy, you have to watch Buffy. And I just didn't watch much TV at the time. So I hadn't seen an episode at the point at which I asked if I could be the editor on the book. And then I started getting scripts. Netflix wasn't around, so I couldn't just quickly catch up on everything. So instead they sent us reams of script, and then we would get the scripts maybe 2 months, or not quite 2 months before the episode would air. So it was more fun to me to read the scripts at that point because I was always ahead of everything. So I was reading scripts and not necessarily catching the episodes on the air. This was during season 2. This was very late in season 2, if I recall. And it was so much fun because the series was so good at that point. In some ways, season 2 remains my favorite season, although all my favorite single episodes are later. Like a lot of favorite episodes are season 5, season 6. But as a whole, like the way that season 2 hit me at the time made such a big impact. And because of my job, I usually once a year will go back and watch the whole show again, which is a pretty big commitment. So it's over 100 hours and just sitting in front of the TV. A couple times I've done it really, really fast. I've done it in like a couple of weeks and just get nothing else done. But usually it takes a couple months to get all the way through the series. And it's just great. And I find that some of them, I think every time I see the body, rather than it having less impact because I know every line of dialogue, it just has more impact because my viewing and my work and everything else makes me love these characters more over time, and just it hits harder. And I think I also understand what you guys are up to and the process and everything in a way that just like all the greatest episodes like Hush and other episodes like that just impress me more as time goes by. Good job, Jim.
So obviously, for those of you who haven't been reading the comics, there is actually, a very collaborative process that happens with the comics as well. Joss is actually very involved, and I think that's what makes the comics great, right? Is the fact that it's actually authentically done, and it's done in the theme and the tone of what makes the show great. So on that note, actually I was going to have Scott and Sierra talk a little bit about the Writers' Summit that you guys did with Joss. And it was Jane? Yeah. So if you guys all want to just kind of give a little insight into what that was like, kind of a little behind the scenes.
Well, one thing I'll say about that was it was a scheduling nightmare to figure out when we could do the Writers' Summit. Joss it was happening, I believe, at a time when he was starting work on the Avengers, but nobody knew about it. So it was very difficult to figure this thing out. And at one point, I was like, "Man, you're going crazy. We can skip this if you want to." And he was like, "No, I am extremely busy, and I just want a day to hang out with my friends." And I don't know if I ever told you that, Jane, but that was like a big part of what got the Writers' Summit on the map.
Nice. Was
like he just wanted to spend that day, with you guys. And a name that we haven't mentioned yet, that failure. Sorry, Drew Greenberg.
Yeah.
Billy is as much Drew's creation as Jane's, and Jane wrote issue 14 off of an overall outline that they came up with together, and Drew is writing issue 15, and Drew was part of the Writers' Summit as well.
Yeah, that's true. We co-wrote this, and it was very much our baby together. And Drew is awesome. Drew's also a Buffy, writer from the show. So it's wonderful that the family sort of gets to stay together and keeps working together on these things, because that's what the show was always about. TV shows are extremely collaborative. You're all in the writers' room together coming up with the stories. So that has continued. The Writers' Summit felt like a writers' room, back at Buffy.
What about you, Sierra? What was that day like for you?
Well, I told you that I started watching Buffy when I was 17. I never imagined I would be in Joss Whedon's living room, helping to contribute to story and ideas with all of these people. So surreal is how I would describe it. And there was karaoke.
And lightsabers.
And lightsaber battles.
Turns out Joss Whedon's living room is just as awesome as everyone hoped.
But yeah, having an opportunity to sit down with everyone and really talk about these characters and ideas and what we want to put them through and how they're going to develop over time, it's just incredible. And it's really valuable as an editor to spend that time with your writers and share those ideas. So, I know people are reading Buffy and they're like, "Oh, this is exciting," or "What the hell are you doing?" But I hope you trust us too, that we love these characters and we're trying our best to make them work and have them succeed and have grand adventures. And they're complex, and they take time. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and one of the things I really like that you guys and Joss have embraced with the comic books is to tell stories that fit the comic book format. I think one of the things that Joss is a real genius about is fitting the content to the genre. So when he has an idea, if he has an idea, he'll go, "Okay, what is this? Is this a TV show? Is this a movie? Is this a comic book story? Is this an opera? Perhaps I've written a ballet." And so that sort of the idea comes first, and then but he makes sure it fits the genre. So one of the things I loved was Enormous Dawn. That's the thing we could never have done on TV. It just would have been too difficult to do, but it fits beautifully on a comic book page.
I thought Joss told me that Giant Dawn was an idea that he had for the show at some point, but just knew that it wouldn't work. Was that ever anything discussed?
I don't remember him talking about that. I know we talked about Teeny Tiny Buffy, because that became one of the unproduced scripts for the unproduced animated Buffy show. As I wrote a Buffy Shrinks Down Teeny Tiny, and the whole idea behind that was, here's a story we can do in an animated world that we couldn't do on the show. So I wouldn't be surprised if he also thought about Big Dawn.
So we may have some special guests stopping by in a bit. So I want to go ahead. We've got about a half an hour left, and there are certainly a few of you in this room who I imagine might have some questions. So if you guys would like, there's some microphones out here. If you guys just want to kind of line up behind them, and we'll call on you one at a time. All right. Please do that safely. Okay, let's go ahead and start with you.
Hi, excited to be here and longtime fan. And I was introduced by a friend who to the show. Before watching Buffy, I never really was into genre fiction at all. And then I introduced some people over here, and I introduced a bunch of people, and over the summer I hosted my first Buffy sing-along at my apartment and had a bunch of friends who had never seen the show. And online there are always these discussions of how to introduce your friends to Buffy and what episode should you show them, or And I just wonder if any of you have friends who are not into genre fiction at all, and how do you introduce them to Buffy?
I haven't encountered that yet, but I know that my fiance has shown people Hush, and I've heard that that's a pretty typical one, I think, to get new viewers in, because it's a nice, not really standalone, but it doesn't really require a whole lot of backstory to pick up on.
The guy who co-created Husbands with me, Brad Bell, hadn't seen a lot of Buffy, and I was sort of trying to figure out in my head that same question, like, what should I start with? And then he stumbled across a marathon on TV, and so he was just sort of watching them random order, like, who's this Riley? He's hot. You're watching them in all the wrong ways. The wonderful thing is that it didn't matter. Like he fell in love with it anyway, just as we all do. Like, maybe the order doesn't matter.
I have to say really quickly, how many of you guys have watched Husbands? How many of you guys know that Dark Horse is going to be doing a Husbands comic? Awesome. Just wanted to make sure that was out there, because October 24th we're going to be launching the first story. So all of you who are fans should check that out as soon as it goes online.
And you can find it either by going to darkhorse.com or on your site, right?
Yeah, if you go to lovehusbands.com, we will link the heck out of it.
I also just wanted to say that although I'm not a television writer, I read Jane in Progress obsessively and loved it.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's my old blog. It's janeespenson.com, and I give writing advice there. And eventually I ran out of writing advice because I'd said everything I know. And so it's all just sitting there in archives. It's really old, but all the old bits of advice are there, and they're still good.
Hi, longtime fan. Thanks for doing this. So I guess part of this, what the panel is about, is how timeless Buffy is. But if you watch it, the beginning is really 90s, and it transitions into that, like, the aughts. Really, and I think it's part of its charm. But so my question, and I guess this is more for Jane, is because is there more towards the beginning, but for everybody as well, is if you started it now in, the 20-teens, what would you have done differently, if anything?
Oh, it's really for Joss, but he's not here. So, yeah, we probably now Gay Slayer would be there from the beginning, because it feels now the way you wouldn't have a show without diversity in the cast. That's part of diversity now, which is great. What would you do differently?
Hopefully it would be on cable.
It'd be on cable, and other than like upping production quality of the green screen and the demons, and we could do so much more with effects now. The stuff I see us doing on Once Upon a Time just blows my mind. Like that, and we do it like on the fly. They're temporary. Thank you. Once Upon a Time, Sundays on ABC. Woo! Yeah. So other than that, I think the stories, the emotions are so evergreen, so timeless that you wouldn't have to change a lot. You could still do Invisible Girl. You could still do Teenage Heartbreak. The body is always a Hush. Once more, we feel like you wouldn't have to change a whole lot. It's just how it looks.
Thank you.
You're up.
Long-time fan from the beginning and everything. I'm just curious about the whole Ripper. There was a while ago, the TV show. I wonder if that's going to be addressed in comics or...
Sorry, can you speak into the mic more?
The Ripper TV show that was talked about a while ago, is that going to be addressed in the comics more so, or that can happen in the future?
That's something we've talked about a lot, and if you've been reading Angel and Faith, we introduced two characters that were straight out of the Ripper show, which no one ever saw. But Giles' aunts, who are actually, they appear to be very young women. And when we first introduced them, did you do the initial design, or did Steve?
I did, but it was... Our main inspiration was that photo that you see in Band Candy, I believe, of the actual young Anthony head in his leather jacket. So it was just kind of a derivation of that.
Right, but I mean the aunts.
Oh, the aunts. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I did those. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I did one of their period pieces, I guess, in the 50s, 60s.
They were actually loosely based off of Anthony Head's daughters, and yeah, that was part of the idea with the show. That I don't know if they were actually going to be in the show or what, but that we based on these two characters in the comic off of his two daughters.
When Joss first mentioned the aunts to me, I think the daughters were still very young, so I think that might have evolved. Yes.
Yeah, we told Tony about it at San Diego, not this year, but last year, I think. And he was excited to hear that some of the stuff from Ripper was going to be showing up in the comics. But there's some degree to which we want to leave things open if ever Joss wanted or was able to do that show in some way. But yeah, I think the show was something they were kicking around for a long time, just like Buffy-related.
Yeah, it was like 10 years ago at least, and Joss came to me about, let's talk about this Ripper show, because maybe it'll happen, and then it didn't happen. But, wouldn't it be great? I mean, these things are, like I said, they're evergreen. Maybe it'll come around.
And Chris has been having a lot of fun. In Angel and Faith, we get a fair amount of flashback, and we've been able to do a little bit more lately. We've got some stuff upcoming where you'll see Ripper. You'll see him like that cover that we showed, but then also interacting like with his grandmother, yeah.
His grandmother, yeah.
Grandmother, yeah. And the aunts who look the same in the late 70s as they do today. So there's little things about Ripper that in the Writer's Son that we talked about how they would work in Angel and Faith, because we're doing a story set in London. In a lot of ways, I think some of what he was going to do in Ripper, we're kind of doing with Angel in that spot, if you know what I mean.
Thank you.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could address feminism to a certain extent, the fact whether it's a conscious kind of inspiration or whether it kind of came out of the show. I mean, I've read about it in my classes as, an exemplary pop culture element, and as we know, kind of the face of feminism is changing today just with technology, and so I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Well, only men work on comics, so I can't really speak.
That's another point too, the fact that feminists can now be men is an idea that's being addressed.
I think that, Joss is a feminist. Joss was raised by a very strong academic mother who I think it's baked in the bread of Joss. And I think he would be the first person to consider himself a feminist. And I think that's actually a thing that we should keep in mind, is that not all men are the enemy. That there are a lot of awesome guys out there who are feminists beside us. And it was very much a conscious decision on Joss's part. It was not sort of accidentally like, oh look, I made a female ass kicker. It was more like, I'm going to make a female ass kicker.
Well, it's definitely a topic that comes up to, as we steer the story, as we all kind of like talk things back and forth, like making sure that we kind of stay on theme and on message. Feminism comes up as a point of conversation quite a bit, I'd say, with the writers. You, sir.
I started with the movie, which came out when I was 12, and then the show was started when I was in high school, so I watched it till the end. And because the Buffyverse didn't start until a few years later, where would you start if you want to get involved now?
I believe you should start with an issue that goes on sale in January.
The Buffyverse sampler.
It is literally a sample of the Buffyverse. Just kidding.
But I don't know. I mean, certainly if you've never read any Whedon stuff before and you pick up issue 1 of Buffy season 9, there's a lot of backstory that you benefit from having read. Again, I watched 7 seasons of the TV show once a year, so I'd say I just watched the whole TV show again. But it's probably a lot to fit into your schedule. But yeah, I mean, if you've watched the show and are unfamiliar with the comics, then I say we did a lot of comics before season 8. But if you were a fan of the show, haven't really read the comics, you start with season 8. There are 8 trade paperbacks that collect everything that we all did together in season We're now putting out these sort of beautiful hardcovers, oversized volumes, a lot of added sketch material, a slight re-sequencing of some of the stories to get it a little bit more in chronological order without spoiling things. But yeah, I mean, if you watched the show and are trying to figure out if you want to check out the comics, you start with the beginning of season 8, I think. If you haven't seen any of it, then I think you want to watch the show.
I've seen the whole show.
Right. Well, I meant maybe for other people. But yeah, for you, I'd say start with season 8. And then there's some other cool stuff that we did with Joss and with other writers. Jane actually was the second writer from the show to come on board for the comics well before season 8. Back in, I think, 1997, a writer from the show named Doug Petrie. Doug got a hold of me through the approvals person and said, hey, I want to write a comic. Would you be up for that? And I was like, yeah, that'd be amazing. And he wrote a couple of short things, but the real remarkable thing he did was this book called Ring of Fire with a great artist named Brian Sook. That was a simple, it was like a 3-issue story set during season 2, which at that point was like 3 years in the past, I think, if I'm remembering the timeline right. And then Jane came on and did a number of different things, including a Jonathan one-shot, which was hilarious. You want to tell about that?
Yeah, when my memory of getting started in the comic books wasn't that. I thought the first thing we did was Tales of the Slayer, but maybe I've got it backwards. I don't know. Man. Anyway, at some point, someone said you can write comic books if you want, because Doug was doing it.
It was definitely before Tales of the Slayer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then that was, Doug had done something, and then in the Jonathan episode, in Superstar, you see Jonathan comic books as part of, look, he's a hero, so there's comic books about him, and it occurred to me, let's make one of those real. And I think I reached out to you about that, and maybe it was later on where Joss came to us and said, we're doing Tales of the Slayer, everybody pick a time period or a literary genre that you want to do. And I was like, Jane Austen, I want to do Jane Austen. And then I was like, oh, I sort of said that without thinking. Now I don't know how to fit a vampire into that. But managed. And now everybody's out there fitting vampires into Jane Austen and stuff.
We should give that story away on the Dark Horse store. That, people need to see that you did that first. I don't know if that answers your question. I'll give you a shot.
You mentioned before what your favorite shows were from the series, and I was just wondering what your least favorite shows were.
Come on. Scott goes first.
I mean, there is a right answer.
No, see, because the thing everybody says, the thing that would be the right answer is Double Meat Palace, but I wrote that.
That's not the right answer.
I can't do it without insulting one of my coworkers, so I can't. And in fact, I can't even think of one other than Double Meat Palace. I know that it's very weird. It's very, and it's got a creepy vibe. I don't know. I used to love Band Candy because it was the first one I wrote, and I look back at it now and I see are the mistakes. So, but I can't do that to myself.
Yeah, I don't know. If I were to think of my least favorite, it would probably just be the ones that made the least impression. I don't think there were any sore thumbs sticking out being terrible. It was more maybe there were episodes that I never think of, and I'm probably not going to think of right now. That's a really strategic answer.
Twitter is so disappointed in you right now, Scott.
The body.
And Twitter is happy again.
What's the lizard one where they're on the swim team? That was a little painful for me.
It's got the Speedo in it.
What did you just mention? Xander? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the
We just said Xander and Speedo.
Nobody knows that wearing a Speedo. And you've arrived just in time to answer the hardest question.
Would you believe that they just asked, what was yours? Lady right here.
Oh, no, yeah, I mean, did somebody say go fish? I'm sure it was a Xander episode. Whatever that Xander guy. My least favorite episode.
That was the redeeming factor.
What was the speed up? Yeah. Was that, I remember that, I think there was, I don't know if that's the one where I kind of, I talked to Larry in the dressing room about I Know What You Do at Night. I don't think that was, was that Go Fish? And he's actually really gay, and I'm like, I know what you do at night. I just remember that it was in a locker room. My least favorite episode, I think, was the first season, and I don't know the title of it, but it was kind of like a Frankenstein one, where a guy was... But I did learn the word, because I was young when I started, I learned the word prodigious, because I was checking something out, and I'm like, I didn't find anything, but he did have a pretty prodigious porn collection. But I mean, and I think Beer Bad, which is another Xander episode, was not one of my favorites. No, I did feel like Sam Malone working behind the bar, so that was nice.
All right, so actually, I'm going to go ahead and ask you one question that I asked everybody before you showed up earlier, which is, did you ever think 15 years after playing this role that you would still come into a completely packed room full of people and still have the same level of excitement for a character that you played so long ago?
To be honest with you, when we were doing the show, people are more excited about it now than when we were actually doing it. Like, I never did a convention. I maybe did 1 or 2 conventions when I was actually on the show. And so, no, I think it's kind of one of those things that's just built momentum. So it's kind of, I think we should thank Jane for that, because without her words, I wouldn't be here right now.
I imagine everyone in line's questions might have just changed.
I'm 14 and I watched the
I'm
show.
also 14.
And it's still, I loved the show when I was growing up.
When you were growing up, right? I also look tell me you've already picked the plot out. Tell me that it's that you're going to be buried underground.
What was the favorite show for you to act and for watch and to write? What was the favorite show for you guys?
My favorite my favorite episode that I wrote might be Superstar with Jonathan. That was really fun to write. But Harsh Light of Day was fun, and Storyteller was fun. That show was just fun to write. It was fun anytime you got to sit down at the keyboard.
And then also, there's Billy now, right?
Yeah,
Billy!
Comic book Billy. Woo. That was really fun, because you felt like I'm adding something to the universe that it's really starting to feel like it's lacking. There was a Billy-shaped hole in the universe.
Yeah, but what was your favorite one to act in?
Once More with Feeling. I always put that one aside because it's like there was Buffy one, that was there. That episode stood alone, and then there's 143. My probably favorite to act in was Conversations with Dead People. Oh no, wait, I wasn't.
Best day off ever.
It was like 10 days. We took 8 days to shoot. I went to Cabo. I really
before Once More with Feeling.
No, nothing. 0, nil, nada, yet.
Did you do training for that? Like, what is?
No, nada, nil. We danced. We took dance lessons. But also, I really enjoy playing Renfield in Buffy vs. Renfield. Because it was so different, and when you play a character for 7 years, and really 8 to 9 years, given the time that when we first started, you look at when you kind of come home and you read your script and read the scenes a couple times. But with Renfield, this is such a departure from Xander, and he actually spoke really quickly. I had to really study my lines when I got home, and prepare more. And so I just kind of love that. And my favorite line that Xander said was in that episode with "This one up is the master." But I mean, it's hard, so hard to. I mean, I'm so fortunate. It's so hard to pick. It's really, really, really hard to pick.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Back over here.
Hi. Thank you guys for coming. This is really cool. So I'm really
you
excited.
guys for coming.
Yay. Earlier, the writers were talking about how they became fans or how they learned about Buffy, and I thought that was really interesting and exciting. I was wondering if each of you could maybe talk to us a little bit about your journey as a writer or an actor, how maybe you were led to be involved in the Buffy universe, or maybe anything that inspired you and just kind of made your life click, that kind of story.
Made my life click. I don't know if my life clicked today.
No, you didn't have meaning before Buffy.
Yeah, well, certainly people talk. I mean, this maybe I don't think this is the answer you're looking for, but it's the answer that's in my head. So we'll try it. People talk about you take a job, you want 2 of 3 things to be good. You want the money, the people, or the product to be good. And if you get 2 of those 3, you found yourself a dream job. And on Buffy, it was all 3. And that was that. Like, these are people that I will treasure forever that I met through Buffy. Enough money that I was able to do things like spend it on husbands now, so I could do dream projects from my heart. And the product, which is like the reason we're all here. So like that did give my life meaning. It gave it all those 3 things.
Working on this stuff, as I said before, I kind of stumbled into it without really knowing what it was, and it just grew to mean so much to me. And over the years, starting to work with Doug, and then later Jane, and then later directly with Joss, so much of what I think I understand about writing at this point is stuff that I learned by watching Buffy over and over and over again, and then having a script show up from Jane, or having a script show up from Joss, or writing a script and having Joss give me notes on it, and doing that writer's summit. It's all just been like this amazing education, and it's cool to be in the position that I'm in, but still have these great opportunities to just learn, you know, have my eyes opened about what it is we're supposed to be doing in terms of telling great genre stories. So, you know, that's what defines this experience for me.
So cool when that one off. Xander. I saw a car coming in and I'm like, holy shit, everyone's on there. And then I realized that I get it. I didn't know. I became a fan of the show literally from day one, and then I would have watching parties at my house, either my house or Joss's house, but maybe sometimes I would tape it and watch it at my house again with people and friends, and if anyone talked, I'd kick them out. And from the beginning of like, I love the theme song so much, it gave me chills that if anyone was, I would yell at people. And this is before I started drinking, you know what I mean? That was just an anger inside of me that quelled when I watched the show. I don't drink anymore.
I was wondering, in regards to the comics, if there are any characters that might have been killed off over the course of Buffy or Angel, characters like Doyle and Lindsay, that I know a lot of my friends like. If any of them would be brought back for the comics, or if any of them were, you know, specifically don't touch them, or anything like that.
Well, you know, we've talked about it, but one of the challenges, I think, is that there's a huge cast to manage, and in the 22 pages of a monthly comic, we find it hard sometimes to give everybody enough play. So adding more
There's
to
room
the...
for Jonathan. Jonathan's little. We can probably fit in Jonathan. Jonathan won 2 Emmys a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Jonathan really to become a superstar.
Yeah, Jonathan went on to become Danny Strong. I mean, it was always Danny Strong. But Danny Strong wrote Game Change and Recount and won big Emmys. He's a huge A-list screenwriter right now. It would be fantastic to bring Jonathan back. And Andrew didn't even really need to stab him, right?
Yeah. And think of how happy Andrew would be if Jonathan was back. He'd be all redeemed. All Andrew wants is redemption. That would be great. Right. I don't know, but yeah, bringing characters back. I want everybody to just yell, and we'll see if one comes to the top of the volume. Like, who would you want to see come back if there was one character that we brought back to life?
Sandra's Eye.
I kind of thought I was going to hear Tara, but it was really Anya.
I mean, it is Giles. I would make a huge Giles.
Yeah.
Were you screaming Giles?
Yeah. I'm throwing something to screaming Giles. Yeah, if Anya were to come back, and I think we talked about this in San Diego, Xander and Dawn have been in a pretty serious relationship for a while now. That would be pretty complicated if you brought Anya back.
And doesn't that make good tea comment?
Okay, we got 10 minutes, so we want to get through. Let's burn through some questions quick.
Over here.
Did you enjoy working with your twin or not?
Oh, Kelly, yes. No, Kelly worked behind the scenes on the show as art department, so when we did the episode together, he actually kind of said, "Oh my gosh, you really do work." Because I tell like my best friends, I'm like, like when if I'm shooting Criminal Minds, I'm like, I'm going to work now. She's like, "Fuck you, Nikki, you can't call that work." She had some vodka, and I'm like, you know what, it is kind of. So now I just say, I'm going to set now, But I think there's that misnomer of like, it's not work, It's a lot of fun, but yeah, Kelly was lovely to kind of be there and have her see, experience what I do.
Hi. I watched the series for the first time last year, and as much as I instantly loved the show, I also had some criticisms about how Buffy dressed. And
it was 15 years ago.
I know.
When you got a body like that, why hide it?
Right. But since I know people have a lot to say about the way women are drawn in comics and how they're costumed, I'm curious for the current comics how much thought goes into how you dress her, how her body is drawn. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, are you talking specifically Buffy or any of the female characters?
Maybe, I don't know. I'll be honest, I've only read part of, I think it was season, I don't know, whatever my boyfriend gave me to read. But I'm just curious how you make those decisions about the women, and specifically, it was really Cordelia and Buffy that I felt dressed really differently than everybody else in the high school scene, so I'm more talking about the lead females.
Right. I think with Buffy and Cordelia, it was more just like hammering home their distinction as like the popular girls, and that's what makes Buffy so fun too, is that dichotomy between her being like, at least at her previous school, very popular and bubbly and cheerleadery, and then being a vampire slayer. So I'm guessing that's why they dressed her so much like that in the shows. I think we're taking a more utilitarian approach to her clothes now in the comics. It seems like George's is for sure. Very
fashionable. It's something you guys talk about.
Comfortable too. I know George's gives a lot of thought to clothes. Yeah. And for my characters, like, I feel like it's pretty easy drawing a large cast of female characters as a female, because I'm just like, what would I wear in this situation? It's pretty simple.
A really short skirt.
Yeah.
I think George's does a great job with costuming. George's puts a tremendous amount of work into figuring out what the women are wearing, and he's really, really good at it. And when we have a guest artist, we really strive to come close to the level of costuming that George's would bring to it. When we first started doing the comics, one of the first questions George's had to Joss was, what should I dress Buffy out of? And Joss suggested the Anthropology catalog. So
wow.
There you go, Twitter, Anthropology. So that became the basis for a lot of what George's did. But, really, George's just has an incredible fashion sense. It's funny, when stuff comes up between Sierra and Freddie, the other editor on the book, we always have to defer about women's clothing to George's, because he just knows it.
Thank you.
Cool. You guys talked about your favorite episode, or least favorite episode. Outside of the body, what was your most, emotional episode to write, to act in, and just take it from there?
Most emotional episode to write might have been oddly Double Meat Palace, because I turned in the first draft and Joss said, I think there's been a miscommunication. And I had to rewrite it all over a weekend, and so what you actually saw was a second draft that was totally different than the first draft. And there's nothing worse than going in and rewriting a thing that you don't feel good about, because I knew Joss didn't like it. So every scene I would go into, before I could rewrite it, I'd have to read the version I knew he didn't like, which just makes you feel terrible, and then you've got to get your energy up and get your confidence up to rewrite it. So I went through a lot of emotions writing that, so sorry.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left, so back over to you.
They're all emotional.
First, I just just wanted to say that I'm relieved that I'm not one of the newer fans. I'm not one of the only newer fans here, because I literally binged on it on Netflix like last month. It was fantastic.
I feel like this line might have been long enough to get a Netflix did.
But my question was, have you, well, watching the show, and then I've only started on the comics, but enough to see Dracula come back. Have you entertained the idea of doing a one-off spin of the adventures of Xander and Dracula?
Well, we actually, Drew wrote a story about them in Tales of the Slayers. It's only it's like a 10-page story, 12-page story. A great artist named Ben Stenbeck drew it. But when we were doing Tales of the Slayers, or no, we did Tales of the Slayers and we followed up with Tales of the Vampires. And Drew just really wanted to get back to Dracula. He's like, I really want to write Dracula again because that character is hilarious. Drew Goddard. Yeah, sorry, Drew Goddard wrote that one. So we've seen that, but yeah, I mean, we like ideas like that float around a lot. We talk about that stuff, but we really try to maintain the level of quality in the books. And when a lot of like tangential ideas come up, we just wind up backing off of them because we've got to try to just focus on doing the main thing right. So if there was a way in which Dracula made sense with what's going to happen in season 10, then sure, Xander Dracula miniseries.
Thank you.
And mini skirts.
Hi, I've been a great fan of the series. Probably the second season of Buffy, I started with Angel, and I've read some of the trade collections of Angel and Buffy, and the thing that I'm so impressed by is the voice, that it feels like watching the TV shows. Like, they flow like they are seasons, and I always enjoy that you call them seasons. And I haven't read all of the series, though, so I might be asking something that you've done already, but I really like Joss Whedon's Frey. And I wondered if there was any thought of doing a Frey series, and has she crossed over into any of these stories? Will she ever? Because again, I haven't read all of them.
Well, yeah, actually, in the midst of season 8, there is a crossover. There's a time travel thing that gets Frey into the midst of the story. So Frey shows up when you get about halfway through season 8. There's a 4-issue run that Joss wrote, and Carmeline, the artist from Frey, came back and he did that arc. And Carl's continued to contribute to seasons 8 and 9. But we did touch on that, and we talk quite often about doing more Frey. But Frey is definitely something that we will only do. The plan has been all these years anyway, that we would only do it when Joss can write it himself. Like, it works to have all these different writers collaborating on a lot of things, but I think Sugar Shock and Frey will only ever touch if when Joss has the time to do it all himself.
We'll be doing Avengers for a few years, so.
He seems like a busy guy.
Thank you. Hearing all of you talk about rewatching some of the episodes, and I rewatch the episodes all the time, and sometimes I'll watch 3 completely different random episodes in a row, and that I found can put new lights on things, like, Jonathan in earshot to Jonathan in conversations with dead people right next to each other, and and I was just wondering, in rewatching it, do you have any experiences that stick out in your mind of seeing things in a completely new light?
But really, I'll try to say this really quickly. But when I was running through the whole series sometime last year, I was watching it on Netflix, watching it on my laptop, and I was in bed watching it, and my son crawled into bed and fell asleep beside me as I'm watching this, and I was in the episode where Andrew kills Jonathan. And Jonathan falls on that big sigil, and the blood starts to spread out and fill into the cracks in the sigil. And I look over, and my 6-year-old son is wide awake, staring at the screen. Damn it, Joss Whedon. That was bad. That will stick in my mind for a very, very long time.
Hi, huge fan of the show, longtime fan. I used to watch it with my grandmother. And it was very integral, being so young and watching the show and seeing Buffy as a strong woman was really integral in my development as a person, so thank you. And also as an actress, and this is for Mr. Brendon over here. I've played parts for like a week, and sometimes I have remnants of those parts in my regular life. Like those characters just show up, and I'm like, whoa, how did you get here? So can you talk about a time or two when Xander has unexpectedly popped up in Nicholas' life?
It's because Xander and Nikki are so much alike. You know, but I played a gay guy once, an over-the-top gay guy for a Lifetime movie, and that was like 5 years ago, and he still pops up. He comes in, you know what I mean? And his affectations were very affected. And then I did a one-man David Sedaris show for 2 years in a row, the Santaland Diaries. Oh, and that pops up all the time too. It's like because my voice changes, you know. So it's the gay characters that for me. Me too. And it's funny. I mean, I'll be like after I did that Celeste in the City, it was literally 6 to 8 months of going in on auditions, and I'm like, I just nailed the gay guy. And it's not. And I was like, you know what I mean? Out of my system. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to exercise it. So Xander is, we're so much alike, it's when I play gay. Those that linger for a while.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have to wrap it up. I'm sorry, we've been getting the times up signal for a little while. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks to James and Rebekah. Everybody come by the Dark Group.